So good to have you with us. The website, TonyPerkins.com. According to a report by CNBC, outlets owned by Disney, Comcast, Warner Media, and Paramount are planning to air a new PSA from the LGBT lobbying group GLAAD that features the mother of a transgender teen who accuses lawmakers in Florida of trying to tear my family apart. No doubt, with all the attention that states like Florida and Texas have been receiving, the public service announcement is a response to laws that are, in reality, trying to protect children from the left's indoctrination. But what is really threatening families are not laws like these, but efforts to push transgenderism on children from an early age as possible. We see the left pushing for earlier and earlier childhood education. What's that about? Well, the left is trying to keep children from getting the help they really need in some cases, going as far as banning counseling. Here with me to talk about this is Joseph Backholm, Senior Fellow for Biblical Worldview here at the Family Research Council, and my Friday host. Joseph, glad to have you with me.
Good to see you today, Tony.
Let's talk about this, because there's an ideological divide between the states, where you have some states, red states in particular, that have been pushing what I call kind of bottom shelf issues, which is the women's sports, protecting women's sports, all the way up to the what we call the SAFE Acts, which are prohibiting surgical measures on minors. But then you have blue states that are refusing to allow parents even to get counseling for their kids.
Yeah. I think this is analogous to what we just went through with COVID and masks. Depending on where you lived in America, you lived in a very different world based on the belief that masks were either helpful because they protected you from a deadly virus, or harmful because they interfered with your learning abilities and social interactions, and they were mentally harmful. And so in the same way, there really is a divide about what is good for kids, what is good for people. Is it good that they allow their anatomy and biology and the way God created us to inform our identity? Or is it good that our feelings determine what our identity? And so those differences, I really do think, are creating two different worlds, and we're starting to see the legislation that creates that.
The legislation is symptomatic of two different worlds.
Right.
What's underneath that?
Yeah, well, underneath that is the assumption and we'll generically refer to them as red states, that still have this idea that our anatomy matters, our biology matters, that we don't determine reality for ourselves. Therefore, it is good for you if you acknowledge that in the choices that we make in the sports, how we construct our sports leagues, and then also in terms of counseling, that it's not bad if a counselor helps you come to peace with your anatomy. And then there are other people who say that's harmful.
An understanding of the fact that there is a creator who creates us is really at the foundational level of this debate. So we're almost looking at two Americas.
We are, because we're looking at two different worldviews. It's really an epistemology. Where does truth come from? Does truth come from our creator, or does truth come from our feelings? And those are...
So the red states would have this understanding of there is a transcendent truth that is outside of ourselves, where we see the blue states more of where morality is more personal preference.
Correct. And I'm not even sure in all the red states they would see it that way.
No, they wouldn't see it that way,
but just gut level.
But it's almost residual in many ways.
It totally is. Yeah, I think that is exactly what this divide is you have two different set of assumptions about the world, about our existence, and about reality.
So how do we fortify and how do we grow that understanding that, look, you've got to come to this recognition that children need to be protected from this, I would just have to say, godless indoctrination coming from the left.
Right, and that is the church's job, and I think you're right that in some ways it becomes a distraction when we talk about women's sports from the more fundamental issue, which is, what's the nature of our existence? Do we define truth for ourselves, or is it defined for us? The sports debate is a symptom.
Right. It's not, this issue ultimately is not about fairness.
Right.
It is about what is true.
It implicates fairness, but when you create it, when you construct a reality in which our feelings determine reality for everyone else, and my feelings determine reality for me and for you, and you're supposed to make decisions that are consistent with my feelings, that world can't stand up. And women's sports is just the beginning of the ways in which that falls apart.
So how do parents navigate this world?
Yeah, parents have to begin to lay this foundation. One of the first things that every parent needs to tell their child is that your feelings do not determine truth, and that your feelings are not the guide to happiness.
That's a counterculture message.
And it completely is, because every Disney princess is going to tell you to follow your feelings. And every character, most characters you see on TikTok and YouTube are going to say, follow your heart. Do what makes you happy. And if kids swallow that, they may end up mutilating themselves in the pursuit of happiness, but other things as well will follow, even if they don't do that. And that's what secularism breeds, is this idea that my feelings are the guide to truth. So parents have to get in front of that and remind their children that our feelings are not the guide to happiness.
And we need lawmakers who will stand firm for these truths, even in the face of the unrelenting left. And I'm grateful for leaders in Florida and Texas and others who have done just that.
That's exactly right.
Joseph, I have a feeling you'll probably talk about this on Friday.
Well, there's a good chance.
All right. Good to talk with you. Thanks so much for joining us.